Okay, the next example is on YouTube. We've got Roddy, and he's being interviewed. The discussion is on hair loss, stress hormone, and there's a small clip of the show that I want to play first, and you'll see why later.
I found the nearest doctor that prescribed Propecia, went to him. He's like, yep, you're losing your hair. And I was like, cool, give me a prescription for Propecia. And thought I was totally in the clear. I started taking it, like, within a couple months, like, totally couldn't get an erection for, like, a 21 or 22-year-old guy, which was a huge problem.
Like, totally. But before we get to the relevant part, there's another clip I want to show. This might be a disclaimer. Check it out.
I'm just a guy that researches hair loss. I'm not a guru or an expert, and I always encourage anybody listening to this to do their own research and come to their own conclusions. But I think really in the right hormonal environment that pretty much anything can happen. So if you somehow pump somebody full of these hormones.
Yeah, anything could happen. But when you roll the bones, you want to create your own luck, so that the odds get even. Now here's a person who's outright saying they're no expert. Why is he being interviewed on Extreme Health Radio? Now with that in mind,
I was losing my hair like crazy, and I was like, this is not going to happen. So, like I said, I got on Propecia, and that kind of didn't work out. So I found Brian's site, immortalhair.com, and I started researching just 24/7. I was totally consumed with it. And so, probably the worst thing I've ever done is, like, I immediately adopted veganism, and this, like, compounded all of my problems, and I did this for a year, and I would consider myself a really good, quote, good vegan.
I'm going to pause right there. I want to save a little until after my commentary. He is saying that the vegan diet compounded his problems. How does he know that? What if, this is where people don't really think enough, or people need to just step back a little and look a little more rationally. What if his problems had nothing to do with diet, and his problems simply continued? The vegan diet does not cause any problems. It doesn't compound anything. It's important to note that in his story, he has had, of course, a whole bunch of health problems like most of us had before we got into healthy eating. And so remember, he's already has health problems. This is a point I like to mention a lot to people when they're trying to deduce what's causing what.
It's like I immediately adopted veganism, and
now, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt that they're not being disingenuous. This guy seems real. Anytime I hear one of these things, where, well, I went vegan, oh my God. Anytime, and all of a sudden I'm hearing this all over the place. Ever since 2010, it's all over the place. People claiming that they were on a vegan diet. It went so badly. So whenever I hear that, I immediately suspect that they're making it all up. They often are. Most of these people are. This person may not be. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But when he says something like, maybe, perhaps the worst thing I've ever done in my life, that's hyperbole. That's just crazy. Resuming.
This, like, compounded all of my problems, and I did this for a year. I would consider myself a really good, quote, good vegan, and I only ate vegetables. I avoided literally, like, all fats. And
again, I'm saving I'm saving something here. He said he ate like literally like no fat. I think that's the quote. Um, well, that's probably not true. That's probably an exaggeration. But if you really were doing that, then that could be a problem. Um, what else did he say? It's like like every other word. He's saying something wacky.
And this like compounded all of my problems, and I did this for a year. And I would consider myself a really quote good.
Wow.
I only ate vegetables. I avoided literally like all fats, and I was probably eating just, like a ridiculously low amount of food a day, probably like 1,200 to 1,500 calories a day.
Paleo. Do I need to say anything else? Quote, ridiculously low amount of food, and he's saying, so that should have been good. Since he's not an expert, then you can maybe forgive him for that, you know. Because in this world of excess, eating less is better. Yeah, less junk, that's true. But to a point, but I can't forgive a person for going on the radio and saying all this stuff that confuses people. Let's continue to see what happens.
Everything was getting worse, and I felt just terrible. All I wanted to do was argue, and my bandmates hated me, and I would...
Yeah, that's low calorie. When you starve yourself, go hungry, you will be irritable. It has nothing to do with the vegan diet.
I hated me. It was just a bad time. And so I'm
45 years old, and I'm having the best time ever. You want to see how much fun I'm having? Watch my other videos. I'm commenting on this stuff which I'm really against. It gets me irritated yet. Yeah, I can still smile and make jokes. Why? Because I'm carved up. I eat all I want, much as I want, around the clock.
It's non-stop vegan rock around the clock. It ain't going anywhere. The time has come.
I started going to bodybuilding forums because at this period, paleo didn't even exist yet. I think.
Okay, for some reason he had, at that point, he got into a bodybuilding forum. For some reason, I hope it wasn't to do research on diet. There's a lot of bro science there. Okay, next.
Physiology all the time.
So he's on the forum.
They always reference was named Dr. John Chrysler, and he seemed to know his stuff. And after a year of veganism, it felt like total hell, and I scheduled an appointment with him.
After a year of calorie restriction, was he eating fruit? Or was he eating grains? Oh no, that stuff's bad for you. So to stick with the vegetables because there's nothing else.
Flew out to Michigan to see him, and we ran my labs, and they were just horrible.
You flew to Michigan to see this guy? What guy? I don't know. The guy who sounded like he knew what he was talking about.
Horrible. I had super low everything, and he was like, "What are you eating?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm a vegan."
And he's focused on the fact that he's eating a vegan diet here. Well, all that means is you're not eating animal products. It says nothing about what you're eating. He wanted to know what you were eating, not what you were not eating.
The healthiest diet known to man, and he's like, "You might want to rethink that."
This expert asked him, "Well, what are you eating?" Is a vegan's answer really going to be, "Oh, I'm on a vegan diet. It's the healthiest diet in the world." So, and now he's laughing about it on the radio while plugging his website, and who knows what else he's selling.
And so that was like the major strike of lightning I needed to kind of get out of my vegan universe and all the information I was like kind of reading just to confirm what I...
The more I play this back, the more I see that there's a hyperbolistic speech pattern. He said, only ate vegetables. Now we know that's not true. So he's not saying facts. Oh, and he said, quote, good vegan. That's rhetoric there. You know what he's saying there. You know what he's saying, puts that in quotes. And why do people go from vegan to paleo? That's all you see. Well, that's all you hear about. It's always the same story.
Was like, well, if low carb paleo is good, and I felt better after eating that for a certain amount of times, and my labs kind of got better, I was like, well, zero carb has to be better, you know? So
He thought that? Not only am I wondering why are people listening to this guy, I'm wondering why are we now listening to this guy?
There was a guy at the time named Charles Washington who was championing a zero carb diet, and I was like, that sounds interesting. I really like meat, and I've already had beneficial effects from this low carb diet. Why don't I just go zero carb? So I did that for about 2 years, and first year was really great, and I think it had really positive effects on my hair, and I noticed I just felt better, and I liked kind of the idea of being weird and eating only one thing, but
Yeah, when your body's in emergency mode and thinks it's starving in a cave in the paleo era, the body just wants to grow its hair. I was going to shave for this video, but I was thinking, after 20 years on the vegan diet, I've got excess hair coming out of my face. Excess protein. Speaking of hair, I'm 45 years old.
For 2 years, it kind of started to wear on me. I looked pretty rough. And from there, I wrote my first book on hair loss after when I started introducing potatoes into my diet. And once I started eating more potatoes, I kind of warmed up a bit, and I was like, okay, carbohydrates are...
So the low carb, what kinds of things were you experiencing? I mean, you did zero carb. That's just...
I remember feeling better than I did on veganism because I just felt horrible anxiety. I couldn't sleep.
One reason you can't sleep is when the body wants to stay awake so you will eat. He was not eating a good vegan diet. That's the bottom line. We told these stories. Some people get weird ideas on how to eat.
I mean, you did zero carb. That's just... It sounds almost insane.
Yeah.